thank you all for showing up on a Friday, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Still hanging out here wanting to listen to a lawyer talk. That says a lot. I don't know what it says, but it says something. But I appreciate it. My name's Teddy. I work at Zynga. I've been at Zynga for 4.5 years. I am actually a licensed attorney. I wanted to give this talk to kind of describe how in-house counsel partners with game teams. But you can't come to a talk given by a lawyer without first having some disclaimers. So that's what I'm going to start with. All right, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not your lawyer. What I'm telling you, that's an actual hashtag that I use. What I'm telling you today should not be construed as legal advice as such. This doesn't, this does not create any sort of attorney-client relationship. Everything I say is public.
I have to pay you $1 for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you'll get my bill later.
Give me $1. Now you're my attorney.
And the images that you see here don't indicate there's any sponsorship or affiliation with the rights owners. They're just here for educational purposes only. And of course, these are my opinions and not the opinions of Zynga Inc. So now that that's out of the way. Why are we here? So I mentioned I've been at Zynga for 4.5 years. The first 3 years was in San Francisco. And I came out here a year ago, and the first thing I did was I tried to figure out who are the other game attorneys in Austin that I can partner with, because I'm used to calling up my friends at Electronic Arts and Glue, Niantic, and Take-Two to kind of ping their brain on best practices, and turns out there weren't any. So I thought that was strange. So then I started calling up, law firms, can I get connections, see if I could create the same type of network. And again, they had done some like one-off type projects for some game teams, but they hadn't really, dove deeply into the video game industry like I had. And when I started describing what I see on a day-to-day basis, they were rather surprised because they didn't quite understand, one, how I could handle all of that. And two, the difference between what they see and what the advice they give is very different than what I see and the advice I give being on the inside. And the other thing I heard earlier this week was that a lot of folks consider lawyers to be a luxury, because they're expensive. I'm very expensive, but yeah, thanks. My mom says I'm special. But I think after this talk, you'll find that lawyers are actually prescriptive. We can be preventative medicine, because the whole point of our jobs is to preserve options and outline the risk of what you're getting into, answer questions, and identify issues before you release product, so that your options aren't sort of limited, so that you don't have a lot of other things you can do in case you get approached by other companies. So hopefully, we'll answer those. And, the other thing I've learned from going to different talks about here is people like to hear horror stories. There's some kind of like schadenfreude going on. So I'll try to interspice some of the things that I've seen, not necessarily at Zynga, but other companies and clients that I've had. So we're at a game conference, so we should start with a little quiz. What do these things have in common? So if you look at this, you'll recognize over there you've got a loot crate in a well-known game that came out earlier this year. Then you've got the logo of my employer above another game company. You've got a well-known character from a battle royale game in a toy embodiment, and then you've got some logos from some other games introduced by two large Chinese companies, Tencent and NetEase on mobile. So what do these have in common? Well, I'm a lawyer, so obviously, yeah, we're not getting there yet. They all have the law in common, but what areas of law? The first part, you've got product compliance, and product compliance deals, and I'll get into more detail later, but product compliance dealing with sort of the regulations, as you mentioned, of what is and is not legal or rapidly becoming illegal. Mergers and acquisitions, those Zynga recently acquired that company based in the UK and Istanbul. In the middle, you've got an intellectual property license because Epic creates the game Fortnite, but they've licensed their intellectual property to Funko Pop to make the figure. So there's law there. And then you've got litigation. NetEase and Tencent entered into litigation because Tencent and PUBG alleged that some of the aspects of the other games, the Battle Royale games that NetEase had introduced on mobile, had aspects from their games. So there's copyright issues as well, which I believe has since resolved. So I also want to start by saying, what don't we do? Because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions. And I say this because I get these questions commonly. What I don't do is I don't get folks out of jury duty. Okay, so if you get a letter from the county, come to me. I can't help you with that. I'm sorry. I don't get folks out of traffic tickets. If you have a moving violation, that's on you. And I don't get folks out of jail. And I know it seems sound funny, but no joke, I actually get asked these questions more often than not. The other thing, though, I want to say is that we try not to say no. As in-house counsel or folks who have worked with legal, a lot of times, the impression is they're the Department of No. But I was never trained to be like that. What we try to do is we find a path to yes to get to success. And I know it's pithy, but that's what we try to do. We try to outline what the options are so that you can make decisions as you're developing your game. So what do we do? So I like to bucket it into two sort of main categories. We contribute to growth and we contribute to governance. The part where we help the company increase value, increase headcount, increase funds, increase intellectual property rights, that's on the growth side, increasing headcount as well. On the governance side, and this isn't exact, but this is just how I think, these are the things, what are the regulations in place that you need to be aware of prior to or during game launch? And to be more specific, growth would be your contracts team or person, employment law, intellectual property, that's patents, trademarks, copyrights, domain names, open source, what I handle. Mergers and acquisitions, as I mentioned before. And on the governance side, you have corporate compliance, like if there's rules that you have to file with the SEC, if you're a publicly traded company, or other rules that you have to comply with, that's what falls into there. Litigation, if you get in trouble, or if you are asserting your rights, or you're dealing with employment issues, that's where that falls. Data privacy, that's something that has cropped up very much so in the last year with GDPR, which I'm sure you've seen as you've been clicking the new privacy policies that everyone's been introducing. Games are no different there. We've got product compliance, which was also mentioned before, like what are the rules around marketing, advertising, social media, monetization, marketing strategies as well. And then public policy. Public policy is partnering with other game companies to identify legal issues from legislatures that can affect the industry as a whole. For myself, in the last 4.5 years that I've been at Zynga, right now I'm head of the IP department of one. So I handle all of the IP for the company, both procuring the rights and protecting them. But I also have been fortunate enough to work with contracts. I did product compliance for a while. I've done public policy, especially recently with respect to introducing games in new platforms and new jurisdictions. Also support mergers and acquisitions. The last acquisition we did and the last couple deals you may have seen. I've also done a lot of our commercial agreements recently, both bringing in software tools as well as partnering with companies that have IP. I've had the pleasure of working on all of those. But in-house gaming counsel is a little bit different. All of those skills, all those disciplines are common to many attorneys. I think an earlier talk was saying that a lot of attorneys pride themselves on their specialization. When you go in-house, you end up broadening your range, which is fun, I think. But in the gaming world, it's a little bit different because our product is different. If you walk into Zynga in San Francisco, you will see this sign as you walk through the light tunnel, because that is what focuses our attention every day, and that's common to many gaming companies, is our focus is on our players. They're not users, they're players. And we're here to entertain, we're here to give them a product that they will engage in and enjoy. And so with that framework, having a different level of passion and understanding of what we do is what differentiates a gaming in-house attorney or a gaming attorney than other attorneys that with whom I've worked. So going back to understanding how the sausage is made, I thought it would be kind of interesting to kind of tell a tale of where and the type of questions that I ask when I'm approached by the game team on new concepts. So this is typical of a day-to-day, not necessarily my experiences at Zynga, but common to many of my colleagues at other companies in any company that's engaged in product launch. But first, they come to me with an idea for a game. I can remember one game that I worked on, which was a 4X game. They came to me, and it was they had just set it up as papers. They hadn't even coded anything out yet, and we played it as a board game. And so, the first questions I always ask is I bucket it in the different categories I showed earlier. IP. Okay, where did the idea come from? Are you paying homage to something that's already out there? Are you licensing or using any IP of anyone else? Are you coming up with anything new or novel? Where's the creativity that I think we should protect as a company? What about the art that you're developing? These are all like IP questions. Patents, copyrights. What about the name of the game? Have you cleared the name? Is it confusingly similar to something else out there? That would be trademarks. And then, what open source tools might you be using as you develop the game? Those are the things that we would track, and those would go in the IP bucket. Then I shift hats and I would go to the product compliance bucket. How are you monetizing the game? Are you going to be using it on social media? Are you going to have gotcha? And if you are, do you have your disclosure rates for those? Also called loot crates or mystery boxes. What countries are you going into? How are you collecting or engaging your players? Are you going to have a chat screen? Are you using Discord or Slack or Line or other means to communicate with players? Are you going to have it broadcasted on Twitch? We ask these questions because inherent in all those questions are legal issues that we have to encounter in order to reduce the risk. If it is another company's IP, or you are going to use other tools, then you pull in contracts. What licenses do we need? Are you using Unity? Are you using Unreal? Are we using our own game engine? Are we developing a new game engine? In which case, should we protect that game engine? Are we licensing out aspects of that game engine? If you are going to market it, or if you are going to monetize through advertising, do you have an insertion order? Are you working with your ad partners? Do you have those agreements as well? Do we need to get those agreements? If you want to use a certain brand name, do we have the license for that? If we don't have the license, should we get the license for that? Do you have enough people to work on the game? If you don't have enough people, do we need to get the people? Do we need to get like an external developer group? Maybe another contract, right, entails employment law. Or do we acquire the team? Do you want to go out and buy a team from someplace in some country? Because talent, sometimes it is less expensive to acquire them than it is to set up some sort of consulting agreement. So those are all of the legal issues that we go through, and that's just in the opening move of developing a game. And as it goes through like the mid-game and then the end game, which is product launch, we revisit these issues every time. Because if it's a mobile game, it's going to have a monetization strategy, typically around events. So I have to clear the event names. I have to see what art they're using, check out the characters, see if they've been inspired by other characters that are out there, make sure that those are clean and not confusingly similar to anything else, and continuously educating them on the different aspects of IP and product compliance that they need to be aware of so that they can come to me next time when these things come up. So that's in a nutshell, a lot of the issues that I see and work with when they're doing game development. And I think it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. After launch, when a game goes live, it still continues. There's still ongoing questions. And I think what separates in-house counsel from outside counsel is, we're constantly seeing the process of the game being developed through the whole period, and we can ask these questions and mitigate the risk before anything, potentially highly risky happens. And so that difference, the context that we bring is what makes the difference between someone who works at a law firm versus someone who works internally. Because how many of y'all have worked with attorneys before? Wow, yeah. You don't count because you work with me. And how many of you worked with in-house counsel? Oh, good. That's good. And are any of those in-house counsel, gaming counsel in Austin? Because then I would like an introduction. No, not you. All right, maybe not. So when you've been working with those counsel, have you seen the difference between somebody who knows the process of how a game is made versus somebody where you've got to educate them? It's like, I need this license. Oh, okay, what do you need it for? Oh, we're making a game. Okay, and then that's it. They just see that. They don't see the whole context of how everything fits in. In-house counsel will have the experience and the passion and the enjoyment of actually being part of that entire process. So most of you guys, it seems that you've already worked with in-house counsel before, but there's always a question of when do you hire in-house counsel? And I think when you're an indie studio, as you grow, there's always sort of an inflection point where your outside counsel spend starts to not make any sense, or when you realize, you know what? It would be better to have somebody internal who can partner with us through the entire process as opposed to just continually having to educate the law firm who may not even be in the same town as you on different aspects of the process. Those are the times when it kind of makes sense to start thinking about bringing somebody in-house. And who to hire is always a good question, because you don't want to hire anyone crazy. You want to hire somebody who's passionate about what you guys are doing. I know at the last non-gaming company that I worked at, like the last company I worked at was Salesforce, and I tell people this all the time. It's like when I worked at Salesforce, nobody there grew up as a kid saying, I want to do CRM when I grow up. When I came to Zynga, it was fairly apparent that most of the people there had always wanted to be in that industry. And that passion that they bring, that's who you want to work with. So even if they don't necessarily have the experience right on point, when we've done our own hiring, we've noticed that folks who want to be there, folks who are passionate about what you're doing, who understand your market or want to learn about it, seem to trump those who may have already done it before, but they maybe just don't really care. I think the other thing that's also important that we're noticing is you want to reflect your gaming audience. Like for Zynga, 67%, I believe, is the last number. 67% of our players are female, and in our legal department, 25% of our legal department are male. So we've kind of skewed it a bit. But what it does do is it allows us to bring in different perspectives of different folks who can then contribute and identify risk of populations that other folks may not think of if they're not as diverse or have those different backgrounds. Going back to that time when I was working with those developers who were showing me the board games, there was a 4X game, and they had a map of the whole world. And I said, okay, what are you going to do? I was like, it's a 4X game. So, you get to be a country, and then you go attack other countries. I'm like, well, that's very cool. That sounds fun. That'll be awesome on mobile, because this was years ago. And they're like, yeah, so the first country you can be Taiwan. You can go attack China. And I said, I don't want to say no, but let's consider our options there. Our option is no. So sometimes things kind of go outside of legal, but are still legal related because, it would be important for us not to develop a game that would cause any sort of political strife.
Chinese embassy on line 1.
Yeah, exactly. Or China, or like, hey, I'm going to China. Oh, sorry, I'm in jail now. Yeah, that's a problem. Other questions that have come up are flags. Every country has different rules with respect to the flag that you want to use. So again, the same team thought it would really, they wanted to use the different flags of the different countries to represent the different teams. But you can't use all of the flags because you have to get a license from every single, country or office within the country, even the UN, and the risk changes and the laws change, so you have to be up to date on that. So, those are the kind of things that outside counsel will probably spend about 2 weeks to 3 weeks researching every single country flag laws and then reporting back, which probably would cost a significant amount of money. But if we're doing that in-house, it's a lot less expensive. And I know this because I asked outside counsel to look at these flags, and it took them 3 weeks, and they charged me a bunch of money. So that was a pretty good example of things that I've seen. But I also want to hear from you guys. I want this to be a bit of a conversation of where you think or what your experiences have been, and how I can sort of show that when you want in-house counsel, somebody who can help fight for you, take care of you when you've gone down, heal you, or just like a paladin. So I want to open it up. Yes.
That was an amazing checklist that you have of things that you review.
Mm-hmm.
Walk through the team. You actually have such a checklist available.
Yeah, you notice I didn't put that in the slide because it's proprietary. No, I'm just kidding. So that checklist has been developed. It's not specific to Zynga. I know there are legal resources that have similar checklists that we have worked off of, but it's from green light to launch. It usually sets off not just at game companies but tech companies. It usually sets off a cascade of JIRA tickets that. That log these things. So I don't have a checklist that I've they have a there is a checklist, or it could be a series of Trello tasks, but it's something that we've developed or other companies have developed internally. But I can summarize it again if that would be helpful. Yeah, exactly. What else? Yes.
Can you speak a little more to the open source? I know there's been a lot of back and forth on what lawyers think open source licenses are versus what game developers use, feel they're okay to use.
Okay, that's a good one. So my training is a patent attorney, and people seem to think that being a patent attorney and an open source advocate are mutually exclusive. That's actually not true. There's plenty of licenses out there that will enable you to use the tool, but when they go outside the license, that's when if you have patents, you may be able to assert them. And there's a series of different licenses out there, like the MIT license, and other licenses that you just have to review to see how it's being used, whether or not the code is shipping with the game, or whether or not it's just being used for internal tools. And usually, on Zynga's website and other websites at other companies that I've worked at or have represented, there's a section on the website that shows like what tools and what licenses are being used. Does that help answer your question?
So also, do you feel that because I work for companies where like people are like, I don't know how to deal with these licenses. No open source.
So when I started in-house, I didn't have any open source expertise, but open source tools are out there, so you have to become an open source expert. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to service your internal clients very effectively. If your in-house counsel is telling you that they don't know or understand those rules, then you should encourage them to get educated on them, because there are plenty of resources out there, and I know from experience, that will help them get up there. But they're just contracts. They're just licenses. You just read them. They're not that long, They're on Wikipedia. Yes?
You used a term that sparked question when you said in-house clients. What do you feel like the relationship is between yourself as an in-house attorney versus being outside, like in-house counsel versus outside counsel? Is it much more like service team conversations are very similar? Is it much more formal? Or do they kind of treat it very similar when you're an in-house person?
I would put it this way. In a game company, the in-house counsel is concerned about the player, whereas outside counsel is concerned about the payer. No, I'm just kidding. The conversations have been similar, but the rapport is stronger, right? Because I've gotten to know our internal game teams fairly well. They know to reach out to me when we have certain questions. I've built a level of credibility and trust where I can have the conversations with them and understand what it is they're working on, so I can identify the risk in a way that's not lawyerly, for lack of a better term. And they know that I geek out on the games, and they know that I geek out on the tools. Like if they tell me they've come up with a new way to apply a machine learning technique to identify certain aspect of the game that can change, I get really excited about that. I think that's really cool. I'll want to explore it further and hear more about it. Outside counsel, it has been hard for me to, as somebody who works alone, and I have to field work to outside counsel, it's been hard for me to find somebody with that same level of passion and level of expertise and experience that can provide that same sort of service. I would say in-house counsel becomes more a part of the game team. In fact, I think one of the best compliments I ever got from working at Zynga was I was sitting down with the leader of the game team, and he was telling me, he was just asking for my input on the game, not any legal advice whatsoever. Just like, how'd you feel about the first-time user experience or for 2E? How'd you feel about the flow? What'd you feel about the farming and harvesting? What about your leveling up? Things like that. And he said, the reason why I'm asking you is because I don't think of you as a lawyer. I think of you as part of the game team, like a producer. And I said, well, I appreciate that. And I told him everything he had to take out. So I was just, no. Yeah.
Following up on that, I worked at a very large in-house counsel studio, and also on the smaller end, where they were very integrated with almost part of important part of the leadership. As teams grow and studios grow, small studios, what strategies involving in-house counsel in terms of where to fit into organizations. Are they part of that leadership role when they're involved in other studio? Are they a service that is by unit? We want to do strategy that's working well when it's inside of the studio. How that whole structure.
Well, I may be biased, but I think the lawyer should be like at the top. Yeah. No, I think any position, titles aside, any position that enables the in-house counsel to consistently get the information she or he needs to deliver legal advice is where that person needs to be, regardless if it's leadership at the top or with the rank and file, so to speak. I think titles do help when you are delivering difficult legal advice. If a game team has gone down a path that you've advised against and you've identified the risk multiple times, and you can even put a percentage value on the likelihood of a lawsuit, and yet they still continue to go down that path. Not to say that I've ever seen that before. It helps to have a leadership title, leadership position, where you're saying, look, I understand what you're trying to do. I understand you think this is the best way to go. This is the risk. This is the cost. This is the likelihood of what's going to happen. I've outlined the risk. Now the business has to accept that risk, and then you have to tell the CEO because I just told him to. And so that's where that can help. When you're an advisory or counselor role to a company, being at that position and having that title helps in that regard. But when you're small and everyone's sort of like democratic with respect to their responsibilities and titles, as long as people recognize that everyone there is to contribute to the whole and is part of the team and everyone has a piece to contribute, even if they're not necessarily like coding out the game or drawing the art, they're a partner team. That level of credibility, trust, and respect are what you need to build out. Yeah. Oh, I think you had a question first.
Yeah, I just wondered if you could give a short list of areas where you still do use outside counsel, where you'll turn to
Oh, yeah.
a specialty that's not part of that checklist, or maybe it is, but it's not part.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I can't pretend to be an expert in all of those areas of law, and I can't pretend I have all the time in the world to answer every single question that comes up. So right now I'm handling a focused, my concentration on IP. But I don't have time to sit there and write patent applications all day long, because even one patent application usually takes somebody who's experienced like 20 to 40 hours. And if I sat in my office just like writing a patent, nothing else would get done. So I have to farm that out to outside counsel. But when I do that, I make sure I identify outside counsel who I've either built a long-term relationship with, that they understand our business and are interested in doing the work. And specifically, I try to find folks who are gamers themselves, and not like, hey, my son plays Fortnite. I want the attorney that says I play Fortnite, that kind of thing. And the same for other areas. The law is constantly changing. We may introduce games on a platform that we have not introduced before, and I will try to do the research that I can. But at some point, you've got to get the gut check from outside counsel. Like we worked on a VR game once. Right, and whenever there's law that says anytime you're in a game, you need to show, or a website or any type of internet presence, you need to show the terms of service and privacy policy. So, famous Barnes and Noble case. When you're in VR, nobody wants to see like legal documents up in your face. I mean, I do, but I mean that's a different game, right? So we had to take one of our games like that it was built off of, and I had to figure out like where can I place it so that it's apparent, it satisfies the legal requirements, but is not obnoxious. So, what we did was like, we just had a little thing at the bottom, like when you died, it says by continuing, you agree to the terms of service and privacy policy that you can then click on, and then would bring up a browser window if you were sadomasochistic enough to open it up and read it. But I had to get that vetted by outside counsel to make sure that that was appropriate and satisfied what I believe the law to be. So it's a little bit of CYA to be sure, but that's another area where we would build in. So if you don't have the expertise or you don't have the time, but you have the budget, that's when it's appropriate sometimes to bring in outside counsel. I think you had a question?
You brought up earlier in your slides, so many people think of lawyers as the middle people rather than realizing what you really are is you're a legal strategist. Now, Now with the goal being, how can I get you past risk without losing more of the money? So how have you been, where there's been tools, this basically goes all the way down the team. Many of the team, especially as I point out to the young ones, it is always F the establishment, which, in this case, legal is not due to F the establishment, is what can I get away with safely. So it's this warring mentality. Have you any specific cases or ways that you try to help change their mentality, help them embrace? Go for the boundaries, don't just try to run the games and see a new life.
Yeah, it's funny because I find that even it's not just the youths that have that sort of mentality. Sometimes senior leadership shares this mentality, depending on their experiences at other companies or with attorneys in the past, even if they're not in-house attorneys. A lot of it is education. And it also depends on the area of law that you're speaking about, right? What comes to mind is copyright with art. It's pretty easy for if you're in crunch time and you see an image on Google image search and you just pop it in your game. That's a very bad idea because you don't know necessarily who owns the rights to that game. And then if an artist is like, hey man, I got crunch, I'm going to just grab this image, it's, fair use or whatever they think it is. And you're like, look, you have put blood equity or sweat equity in some of the art you've created. And I try to put the perspective on them. You've put sweat equity in the art you've created. Do you think you would feel just as comfortable if someone just grabbed it and not giving you any credit for it? No. So let's not do what you just did. Let's alter it in some way. Other aspects, there's countless horror stories that I can always tell a game team of where things have gone wrong. Mergers and acquisitions in crappy due diligence are rife for areas of where there are cautionary tales that we all share. Yeah, we bought this company. We decided not to vet the IP. Turns out the guy created that IP when he was at another company. Is that bad? Yeah, it's probably pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Did you get a license? What's that? Yeah, we got problems. So, and that's happened at small companies, and that's also happened at large billion-dollar publicly traded companies that I've worked with, where they forgot to ask the IP attorney if there was a license in place for the core technology that they just spent $800 million for. So, yeah, it happens. Sometimes they just don't want to ask the patent people, because patent people are like the geeky attorneys. And then when they find out what happens when you don't ask the geeky attorney, you get a big bill and litigation. So, yeah. But it creates work for us, so we appreciate it. Yes, go on. Yes, Danny.
So I'm actually an attorney, so some of this resonates with me.
Yes!
I have a question. I guess what sort of things do you wish outside counsel knew?
Are you outside counsel? Okay. We should have lunch. That you pay for. No. In-house counsel loves free lunch. No. So kind of what I said before about you've got to be excited to work with your clients, and it shows, right? If I'm talking to potential outside counsel, and yes, they can check all the, people have normal checklists in their head, big name law firm, or went to some Ivy League school, or clerk for some Supreme Court job. I don't care about any of that crap. What I want to know is, why do you want to work with Zynga? Do you play our games? Do you play other games? What do you like about them? What don't you like about them? And I actually interview candidates the same way. What's your favorite Zynga game? What's your favorite mobile game? What's your favorite console game? You've got 13 mon and you're playing Magic. What do you do next? That kind of stuff. Easy questions, just boilerplate. But the passion, if I don't see the passion in wanting to do the work for the client, then to me that's an immediate turn off. I want somebody who wants to come and do the work and then tell me what the value add and is willing to learn about the business. I mean, obviously you're at a gaming conference and for game leadership, so clearly you must have an interest, or you were at the ABA conference downstairs and then you just popped upstairs. Yeah, right, yeah. So I think that's really basic. And then
curious about small and medium-sized companies. What are some guideposts or guidelines around when you should shift from outside counsel, because it's cheaper because I'm doing one step right now, to making the investment in inside counsel? What are some guideposts to kind of drive the decision making?
That's a good question. I mean, the first part comes definitely with the financial ability, and then it comes with what kind of risks you're starting to encounter that may be particular to your business or in an area that you haven't encountered before, where you want to build a long-term internal relationship with somebody who can continuously advise on that new business arm. So let's say you're going into a new platform. You've always done console, now you want to go mobile. You can lawyer up with outside counsel, but it would be better, I think, if you brought in somebody who had mobile experience to kind of show you that the monetization strategies on mobile and the marketing strategies on mobile are very different than console, because you're not going to be as reliant on DLC as a monetization strategy. If you're going into a jurisdiction or area where you think you're going to actually have a strong presence, you need boots on the ground. Let's say you're growing your company rapidly, you've done acquisitions globally, now you've got like 300 engineers in India, and you're encountering all sorts of issues with respect to contracts, cultural sensitivities, employment issues, et cetera. Then that's a good time where you want somebody who's trained in that specific area to be boots on the ground there. When you get to a certain size, then you will see that the outside counsel spend gets super high. And then the question becomes, what kind of lawyer do you get? Right? Is your first hire going to be a patent person? Unlikely. Is your first person probably going to be a generalist and also somebody who can bring in the revenue, so somebody with commercial experience on the growth side, and also can do employment law, because you're trying to increase your company through headcount, and you want to make sure you don't run afoul of employment laws, because that could get very expensive and very troubling very quickly. There's a question in the back. You playing a Zynga game? I appreciate that. Thank you. Words with friends? Nice. No.
Is there a certain strategy you aim for? Well, there's a certain strategy, or even just what should we do?
Are you talking about your in-house hire?
Yeah.
Okay, so what should you look for when you're hiring in-house counsel? It depends on the stage and what you're trying to accomplish at the time, right? If you're looking to IPO, then maybe you probably want somebody who's done that before, as opposed to some person at a law school who's never touched a financial document before. If you're opening up a whole new publishing arm, my experience has already been that it's sometimes very difficult to find that niche attorney that has done that before. Maybe you have to look outside the gaming industry to somebody who's worked in entertainment or other similar industries where they're adept with contracts, and can negotiate well. I think the feeling you get when you do a hiring decision for any other position in your company should be a guide. You go with your gut. You find somebody that can answer the questions, who has a cultural fit, who brings a unique perspective because of their diverse background, that can help open up your eyes and identify new markets, new people, new questions, new issues, and then it's just networking and word of mouth to find that right person. There's the Video Game Bar Association, which is a group that's staffed with a lot of attorneys who are interested. Most of them tend to be outside firms. But yeah, sometimes you're going to have to bring in somebody from the outside and then, train them up or have them join in-house. And I will tell you, the other thing you have to watch out for when you're hiring somebody from an outside law firm is to make sure they're not an outside law firm refugee, which is to say they'll just agree to whatever you say as long as they just get out of the law firm. You can see that too, because they don't really take an interest into your exact business. Maybe they know a little bit of the gaming industry because they play a few games or something like that. But if they can tell you publicly available information about your company or some kind of strategy that they think would be best for you going forward, given what limited information they have, that's probably a good fit. They say, I see you're in this business, I see that you might encounter these issues, maybe you want to, and you might actually find that from one of your outside counsel. You may be working with an outside counsel, and they don't just answer the question that you've given them, but they give you a strategy and a roadmap of how to either prevent it in the future or other things you haven't even thought about yet. That's something was well, it sounds like you're really interested in what we're doing and what we're building here, and you're tied into our mission statement. Maybe you want to join our team for a huge salary cut. Yeah. Yes, Jen.
What's the legal issue you think game devs should be paying more attention to, and why?
Well, so many. I think it depends on the platform you're in. And of course, my most recent experience is going to be in mobile. And I think the things that are going to be the biggest potholes up front are in the areas of data privacy, of collecting your players' data, where you're storing it, and if your player decides they wanted it deleted, do you actually have the technical means to do it? I think that's an area that when you're growing fast and you just want DAU, you're not really paying attention to what you're doing with the data you're storing. And there's also that temptation, for lack of a better term, to just take whatever because it's available. Maybe you'll need it later. Maybe we need their GPS data, but are you using it for anything? No, we just want to have it because maybe we want to market. If you don't need the data, don't take the data. You can always get it later. And also making sure you have the terms of service in place and privacy policy in place to tell them what you're doing with your data. And that's not just games, but any tech company that's taking data. If they're not telling you what they're doing with your data, that's a problem, because people are willing to give you data as long as you tell them what they're doing with it. So I think that's a big pothole. And then the other pothole would be on the IP side, right? It's very easy to want to stand on the shoulders of other successful games out there, which is fine as long as you're doing something to improve it and you're not just wholesale copying, right? Because that's just not good at all. And then the other side is obviously employment law. So, yes.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the who to hire. I'm really interested in the when to hire. So as someone who would eventually like to start up my own game studio, I'm immediately intimidated by the costs. So obviously there is a high cost to getting sued that could potentially take your whole company down, so I want to protect myself. But on the other hand, I might barely have enough money to cover my current costs with just employees making the game. So I guess it's kind of a two-part question. One, when is the right time to start talking to a lawyer? And secondly, are there any free or more affordable, cost-effective legal resources that might be available to me in town that I should be aware of?
Those are great questions. When you're a startup, and it's my personal opinion, your primary focus should be to get the game out. Get your game in the hands of players, your play testers, your soft launch people, because you can't afford an attorney if you have no money, right? And you need to make money by getting a game out there unless you've got significant financial backing. And if you do, they're probably going to start telling you when you need an attorney, anyways. When you get to a point where you see a positive revenue stream, but you're getting a suspicion that you're potentially running into legal issues, or you're continuously having to solve for problems after they've arisen, that's maybe the time you want to start talking to at least an outside counsel. Obviously, you would have to if you're starting to get cease and desist letters, or people are complaining that you're not paying them, and they're complaining to equal employment opportunity commission or something like that. then you're already starting to talk to attorneys. But once it starts getting to an inflection point, you're like, we're talking to attorneys a lot, and it's spending a lot of your time and taking away your time from making the game. That's when you want to start thinking about bringing somebody in-house. And I think you'll find there's a lot of folks who would love to be an attorney in a game company because it's fun. Yeah. Yes, Lucian.
Just to kind of add to that, anytime you as a company or you as an individual are signing a contract for somebody to give you money, it is very much in your interest to go ahead and have an attorney look at it.
Yeah.
I've had multiple startups. Every single one of them, I've made some mistake in the contract process that somebody saved me from or didn't, depending on whether or not I thought, oh, this is important. My wife's company set up their equity share. Something you think, oh, okay, that's got to be a solved problem. They set it up in a way that cost us 40% of it when it came down to the sale. And that was literally, that's 2 MBAs. My wife and I are both MBAs, and it's just fucking up. So don't trust just because you've read 5 or 10 of these that you can catch all of them.
Yeah, that's a really good
If
point.
there's real money on the table, get avoid it.
Yeah, that's a really good
Who
point.
actually knows that kind of law?
Yeah, because a lot of times those contracts that you're seeing, maybe even for the 5th time, I've seen for like the 50th, and I know where the language is being inserted that could potentially like make me money, but not you money. So yeah, not that I would do that. I would never do that. Yeah, but that's a really good point. Contracts are rife for potential pitfalls. Yes.
Advice do you have for people who are communicating with their in-house counsel and you're getting a no? Like, how can you reframe it or approach counsel and actually get not necessarily yes, but a good outcome, just a no?
Well, first, let me caveat that by saying the only time I will usually just say no outright is if I know it'll result in jail time or significant fines, right? And the risk completely outweighs the potential benefit. Like, and this, hypothetically, let's say a game studio decides, they want to do something or pay homage too closely to another game that's out there, and this, I will accept the risk. If we get sued, we get sued. But that's just one studio and a company full of studios. They can't accept the risk on behalf of the entire company. So that's when I would say, look, hell no, we're not going to do that unless they're really going to pay, or they like have gone to the board and the board's okay with it. Otherwise, I think it's best to remind your in-house counsel that they're there to advise. They're not there to make strategic business decisions on how a game is going to launch or go. What you're looking for are options and costs, right? What's the risk? What's the potential of that risk actually happening? What are the costs if that risk actually plays out? Is that something I can account for? Does that help?
Yeah, so you're saying like maybe instead of asking, can we do this, maybe ask, here's what I'd like to do, what are my options?
Yeah, I think that's good. And if they're not like able to communicate that effectively, then they should work on their communication styles and in-house legal skills. Yeah. I'm happy to talk to them. Because actually, no, it does come up a lot. Sometimes, and I've seen this, this comes up in, like Mr. Coppersmith talked about this yesterday, when folks come and they're promoted, they transition and they screw up their transition, and that affects them going forward. That's the same when sometimes attorneys start at new companies, or attorneys come from the law firm to in-house. In-house is a very different practice from outside. When you're an outside law firm, you're only getting the questions that no one else can answer from the inside, or they want CYA. Right? And then they're giving you the worst case scenario, or you're always seeing the worst case scenario because you're a litigator, and that's when people just go to battle, right? In-house, we see things before they get to that stage. And so we have to advise and give counsel and identify the risks early on without being like, if they don't take my advice, I'm going to be so angry about it, and it's personal. It's not personal. It's like they're the business. They're making the decision based upon the facts that they've given you and you're giving back. So to add to that, make sure in-house counsel has all the facts even if you don't think they're relevant, just tell the whole story, because context, as I showed in another slide, context is king. And that's the same with dealing with legal issues, interpersonal issues, management issues, everything. When trying to give advice, either it's mentoring advice, legal advice, or strategic advice, the more information I have, the more that I understand the perspective of where the question is really coming from, that's when I can, do the best job. And it's never going to be one-off. The facts I give you one time may change tomorrow. So just keeping me updated really, really helps. So, and then that's the benefit of being in-house, is they're partnering with you. They can see how the problems develop, if any. Yes?
So, thinking from what you said then, in an idealized situation, in-house legal is part of the production team.
Yes.
So then it would directly feed into design and would directly sort of like mitigate the problem before it's done, or would it be a case of towards production?
Yes to both. And here's another lawyerly answer. It depends, right? Because it's not like when I started at Zynga, I started before all the games were greenlit, and then now I could advise going forward. You're always coming in and you're jumping on a moving train. So it's always going to be different aspects, and it's incumbent upon the person joining who's in-house counsel to understand what the development process is, and then to insert themselves accordingly. Because you can't tell them, like, it's not going to be your job to tell them when to give advice. It's going to be their job to figure out when to give advice and how to do it in a way that doesn't obstruct or disrupt the process or push back production dates unless it's something that really, really needs to be changed. I personally try to get involved early for a couple of reasons. On the patent side, file early, file often in order to procure any potential intellectual property rights in order to give credit to the creators. I want to do that even if the game never goes out. There's still innovation there that I may want to capture. The other side of it is it's just awesome and it's fun to see game ideas before they even launch. I don't care if it's like a wireframe or some weird, like a board game or whatever like that. I want to see it early on because it's just cool. But at the same time, those are the times I can have conversations with them where they may decide to go down a path that didn't occur to them to be a potential legal issue, like creating the fact that you could be Taiwan and go battle against China, things like that, But if I was not hanging out there, if I had not built the relationship with them in this pre-production process that may or may not have been greenlit yet, that would not have come up till much, much later when they've already drawn the maps, drawn the figures, done the balancing, because that's really hard. When you have to tell them to make a change and it messes up the balancing, that's painful.
The experience I've had where in-house would have been useful as opposed to a producer within the map was I was working on a driving game, and the car licenses were all about as official as you could get, which led to about 3 different redesigns of the game because the cars themselves essentially become the character, and the character is developed by context. You can't put licensed product with certain context.
Yeah.
And I was having issues with, how people let you kidnap anybody before they let you pretty much do anything.
Yeah.
So the game essentially became Ford Simulator.
Yeah.
To be able to have
awesome.
Counsel at the beginning, it would have led to actually being able to understand what troubles you'd be leading up with as opposed to just blue sky and everything at the beginning that,
yeah.
Ferrari's going to learn how to net car alone after or varying around problems.
Yeah, that's very true. And that's where, again, context helps. Talk to the game lead and see, what jurisdictions are you interested in going to? How are you going to use these cars? Because you can get the license, then you read in it later. It's like, you can develop it for this game, for this purpose, for this time, but you can't have it entered in this country, which is super lucrative. And you didn't think about it before. But if you knew that before, the lawyer could have gone in and say, actually, no, we want that territory. We think it's going to be good. Or, if the lawyer would have known you're going to blow the car up, they could have asked.
That is a strange thing, like Audi can't be blocks around the prostitute, which is like, well, the camera can't see the car, you want to work on the building anyway, so how would you be able to know? I mean, I'm massively tied into it all.
So, bouncing off of that, so you're suggesting more, holistic changes rather than like repair jobs.
That's always better because it's very difficult for in-house counsel to give advice that forces the team to do a repair job, which can then mess up the balancing of the game.
I meant on like the league contracts, like getting out of it and say, it's okay, prostitutes are fine as long as the camera can't see them.
Yeah, I mean, you should.
Because you'd have to go back and get it relicensed, right?
Yeah, you'd have to amend the contract and say, hey, a prostitute's okay? Yeah. Yeah, see, that's another conversation. Other companies, other industries will never have that conversation. Just like, yeah. Take two, right? Yeah. Yes.
How involved are you with the actual game development process? So I actually worked at Zynga about 8 years ago, 10 years ago, and we were working on a game called Familyville.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, it was going really well, and then another game was released, and our entire game shifted. And so, you know, we changed assets and things that made it similar to this is a long time ago in Zynga's history. But do you typically follow the development process through the end? Because I'm sure that if you were a part of when that was happening, you definitely would have put your foot down.
You're damn right I would have, because I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. I like to be involved the whole time. I think you would be shocked to see how much process we have now at Zynga. That was a personal opinion and comment. But yeah, they're now. Yeah, in any company, right? You want to have certain check-ins in place before the product comes out, right? And you want to make sure that your partner, all your partner teams, right? If you're getting money in the team, have you talked to your payments team to make sure that you didn't put something in that'll break it? You know, if you've got like some kind of chat in game and you've got a different team building chat, you know, you checking in with them to make sure you didn't break those APIs either. Legal the same way, you know, if you've changed your assets. Now, it's always hard to remember, so it helps to have a cadence of meetings during the development process where you're meeting your partner teams, you know, your customer service team, because if you're going to have a game and you want to make sure you're creating forums for those players, customer service involved in case some of those players get angry or if there's harassment on those threads. You know, have you built those in? Do you have reporting and blocking in your game, which are other legal issues that we would get involved in as well? You know, there's different gates that you should check in regularly, depending on the cadence of launch, where it makes sense.
Would you like to see, and so I'm a QA manager, and I tend to try and point out things that I think, you know, might be a legal issue in some way, but I don't know if it's necessarily something that is on a normal checklist, you know, in terms of like QA to like go through and see like, oh, do we have that license? Do we have that license? Do we have that license? So would you like to see more involvement from like the QA side of things, or?
I would. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter where the information is coming from. You know, if someone asks me, I don't care where they are. If they say, hey, you know, I noticed we have a character in there that looks like Miley Cyrus or something like that. I don't care who told me that. I would want to know because I don't watch Miley Cyrus all the time. That would not have occurred to me. But if somebody else identifying it, then I ask somebody else to say, does it really? You know, if it came from QA, if it came from somebody in culinary, you know, who play tested the game while they were like brewing beer for the rest of us, I would want to know that so that I could address it. So that goes into creating a personal network within your company so that all the information that's relevant can come to you when it's appropriate. And, you know, it isn't, because, I mean, for me personally, I don't have the bandwidth or time to like ask everybody if everything's going on, but people know to ping me. You know, we have email distribution lists and they can ping me on, they can text me, hip chat me, Slack me, email me, you know, stuff. And it's not always legal issues. Sometimes it's like cool stuff, you know. It's like, hey, our competitor came out with a really cool game with a really cool mechanic. Have you seen it? Oh, let me check it out. That is pretty awesome. I like that. Now I'm sucked into that game. Thanks, man. So, yeah.